Join us on the Swim Monkey.
Swim Monkey TV.
On the Monkey.
Stories! It's story time again. July 20th, 2020, 7/20/2020, Joe Hour. We're back. I'm Sid Cassidy. I'm the guy. I'm so privileged to be spending these days with you, Joe, even virtually. And I just want to say, Joe, you're up there in Orlando. I'm down here in Boca Raton. We're in Florida. And we're getting through this. You know,
we're getting through it.
How's it been going this week for you, Joe?
Well, you know, it's gosh, we've already had a couple of practices already. We're training pretty hard actually, and doing our dry land swimming, getting a couple hours in the morning, and then getting about an hour in the afternoon plus dry land. So things are going okay. We're trying to find meets to do in August and September because the kids tell me they're chomping at the bit and want to swim. Sid, they're like,
I know. There are times from this weekend, so-and-so did this somewhere up, and you know, I get it. There's competitions going on, and Joe, we can do our best with what we've got when we got to do it. And tonight, our job, as it is every Monday night when we tell old stories, or Wednesday nights when we have the coaches' happy hour, our job is to entertain anyone who just wants to get away from all that nonsense. So tonight, Joe, I'm really excited for you to learn from our esteemed guests tonight. We have two guests who were both very instrumental in the early days of USA Swimming's open water program. That also entails a lot of pool swimming for these coaches on deck. I want to bring in first a guy who I have known. I watched him swim before I knew him because he was so damn fast for Texas A&M. And I watched him as he grew into an unbelievable coach. He just retired after decades with Southern Illinois University. The great Rick Walker. Where is Rick? There he is. Welcome, Rick. Where are you today? What's going on?
Well, Sid, I'm in Carbondale, Illinois. And I'm still coaching. I coach the Saluki Swim Club here with age group kids, and still involved with Uwana Open Water for USA Swimming, and getting ready to do a clinic for Ghana virtually this weekend. And actually, Sid, you're going to love this. I became an ordained minister, and I am going to marry two of my former swimmers at the end of July here. So that's coming up pretty quick. And started a new job as chief strategy officer for Farm Box Foods.
Wow.
He's busy. This guy doesn't stop.
Yeah, Rick, how many years were you head coach at SIU?
32.
32 years.
32 short years.
Hey, man, the NCAA is not an easy place for any coach. And you've done it with integrity and excellence, and hats off. And I was expecting you to tell Joe and me, yeah, I'm riding off into the sunset. I'm going to kick back and do it. That's cool, man. You're still.
I wanted to, but Eileen, my wife, said no.
Well, and I know you being the wise man that you are, Rick, because when you have a female, especially a strong female in your family, you're smart if you say, yes, dear, kind of like I do to my wife, kind of like I had done for many, many years and still do with our second guest. Not my wife, but my incredible sister, Marian Cassidy Clark. There she is. Hey, Mary.
Hello.
Now,
that was a nice segue. That was a nice segue right there. Very nice.
I should alert anybody who's watching, a lot of people get surprised because Marian kind of keeps it under wraps. You know, she's 10 years behind me. I actually coached Marian in my first 2 years of coaching at Wilmington Aquatic Club. She was a sophomore and junior, maybe freshman, and
Right.
it was a ways ago. But she was an incredible talent. Went to Pittsburgh, became an academic All-American, team captain, all these things. And then came down and coached with us in Miami a little bit before she turned around and became head coach of women. And now is kind of retired from that role. Marian, where are you today and what's going on?
I am still coming to you from Pittsburgh, and I am not coaching with the college team anymore. I'm working in the administrative end of things. I handle all the travel for all the sports, and I do run the club team like Rick was saying. I still do coach, and we've been hard at work over this crazy time. We've done a lot. We've been pretty blessed with finding some pool space, not at the university, but outside pools, a country club and another pool. And we've been very lucky and been able to do a lot of training. And of course, I just finished my Zoom dryland. And
Marian, how in the hell did you put up with Sid for all those years? I mean, what in the?
You know, it was an interesting relationship we had.
Oh my gosh!
I think you coached me for 4 years. You might not remember that, but I do.
4 years. That sounds about right.
From eighth grade through junior in high school.
Okay.
And the first 2 years, I didn't really talk to him because it was not cool to talk to him. And I didn't want him he didn't want any like, preferential treatment. And I didn't want to look like I was getting any. So we just sort of passed in the night.
Did you call him coach or what?
I never called him. The funny story, I never, he is to me and my family, he will always be Stevie. He is not Sid. He has always been Stevie.
Aww.
And
I like it.
I like it.
I've always called him Stevie. And when I remember one time I was probably about a sophomore and I could not get his attention, and I kept saying, Stevie, Stevie, Stevie. And I finally just went, Sid. And he turned around and he said, don't ever call me that. He's Stevie to me.
Yeah, it's cool, but it's good to have you two. I mean, you know what it is, Joe. I mean, it's just family. But I'm pretty blessed to have, the entire family. At one time, we were all swimmers, but Marian was the one who really took it, and kept doing it. I guess between the two of us, where it became a career. All those great years it did, and she started coaching, pretty much right out of college, and that was the 80s. And then by the late 80s, you were building your reputation at Pittsburgh with some very good swimmers. And before, Joe, we started the show, I was just quickly reminiscing that USA Open water was an afterthought. And let's face it, you two guys know, because you grew up as we all grew up. We were all pool swimmers. But we found something about that open water scene to attract us. For me, it was when I was a beach lifeguard and starting to do marathons. I talked Marian into doing a few marathons. I remember 1988.
Yes.
Atlantic City. Rick, that was you and I was actually doing a comeback, Joe. I was making to do a solo 22 and a half mile. I was already 31 years old, and we were both coaching at Florida State.
Yes.
You had already coached.
I just finished at Pitt. It was right before I came to Florida State.
Okay.
But you were at Florida State.
And that's when Terry Mall and Bill Schultz and you and I were all coaching together.
Wow, cool.
And so we trained, and we went to Atlantic City, and I was all ready for the race. They weren't. The Coast Guard made them shut it down about an hour and a half, 2 hours into the race, because it was so cold and there was so much fog, and they had to guess what position you were in. I was in fourth, And I know I would have been second. I made a comment in the paper that came back to haunt me because my good friend, I mean, I believe that in the long run, Marian was the one that got the shortest end of the stick because Monique Wildshoot, who's a great open water swimmer from Holland, nobody knew Marian. So they were about 400 meters apart. And I said, oh, Marian's at least 100 meters ahead of her when they called the race. But they get, it was like, and it was a matter of another $1,000. But while the Atlantic City and all those are paying professional races of anywhere from 25 to 88K, and I want to hear some stories about down in South America, Marian, because I know you and Karen Burton traveled down there. But the amateurs in the late 80s, Rick, I want you to bring us up to speed because USA Swimming was just beginning to recognize, and I remember that's when I met, in the early to mid 80s when I met Dale Petronic, God rest his soul, great man. Without him, none of us would be sitting here today.
Yeah.
Dale Petronic and Penny Dean were in a meeting. There were 3 people, maybe 4, when I went into convention in Snowbird, Utah, 1981. And they were talking about trying to get funding together from USA Swimming. Well, finally, 5-6 years go by, and we talked somebody in USA Swimming, which was a new organization, to give us some funds to send some kids over to Europe. Rick, what was that? Late 80s. Do you recall?
That was, that was late 80s, about 88, 89, because 1990 was the first FINA World Championships. So USA Swimming took us under their umbrella. And I do remember that the first time that we were officially meeting, I entered into this room and everybody's sitting around talking and saying, well, we need to be able to have connections here, connections there. Well, Doug Ingram was the chairman of the Swimming Olympic Committee at that time. And I said, well, I'm fairly connected, with that former swim coach of mine and assistant now for Doug. But so we got started there, and it was, I'll tell you what, the first couple of years were really, really hard. But it all worked out, obviously.
So Doug Ingram was actually coaching you, right?
Doug Ingram was the coach at Indian River. So I swam there a year, and he left Indian River and came here to Southern Illinois. And I went to Texas A&M, finished up swimming there. And when he got there, they eventually combined the program so that he was looking for a full-time assistant. And that's when I came up and started working with him as his assistant.
Okay. All right. So when you were working at that time, you went from Indian River to Southern Illinois.
No, Indian River to Texas A&M.
And then to Southern Illinois.
And then to Southern Illinois. So
how about your glory days at A&M? Give us, I know you were a school record holder, but tell me a good distance race.
Wait, what years were those at A&M?
That was 82 to 81 to 83.
So you had Chris Emig. No, Chris Emig just got there.
Yeah. Chris got there just after I got done.
Oh, wow. So yeah, he lives here in Winter Park, and I see him all the time. He's a good buddy of mine. Yeah.
Good guy.
He went to Winter Park High School, Sid.
Yeah.
Chris Emig.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I knew that. Yeah. Well, Winter Park, I mean, that goes back way back. We're still getting emails and texts. I saw KK Aker, Karen Aker, talking about Winter Park. All right. So, Rick, when did you first meet Marian?
Oh my goodness, that would have been Marian. What was that? It was long before we ever really took an official trip.
Right.
Just through, she had swimmers. She was swimming.
Yeah, I think
she started off swimming.
The 15K in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
In and through. Yeah. I think that's when I met you.
Wait, that was a national championship.
That was in the intercoastal.
Yeah, right? We did all the canals. We swam
that was crazy.
People's houses. Yes.
Well, I remember very well the International Swimming Hall of Fame, which I can't wait till they come back because we talked to Brent Rutenmiller about bringing in some more. And hey, by the way, I say this to all my guests, Rick and Marian, if you're not members, join. Be 1 in 1,000. Join the International Swimming Hall of Fame. We're going to open it up next July, and you want to be a member. It's going to be unbelievable. But that's just a little aside. Where we are tonight, you two guys met. That was Tim Murphy's classic race because it was right after Y Nationals, and he was coaching. That's the Penn State coach now. Tim had, oh yeah, he had the Golden Y Wahoos, and they were required the day after Nationals. Yes. There was no question. Everybody else going out party Y Nationals. Murph would take 30 kids and even the sprinters, and they'd be doing the 15K, and he'd say, "You're lucky it's not the 25," you know. But Joe, we had a 10K, we had a 15K, we had a 25K. Eventually, we switched the 15 down to the 5. But it was incredible stuff. But Rick, we were not even close to being recognized as getting into the Olympics. But that did come about. And you know, you brought up something a little bit earlier. You brought up a guy named Doug Ingram, and you said he affected your career in positive ways. I know for me, as an up-and-coming guy trying to work politically, once I got into the FINA and you took over as we'll get into that. But, you know, he's somebody that I could always count on. And I think, you know, since we could always count on him, I asked him to join us tonight to surprise you. Hello, Doug.
Oh, Doug Ingram.
Now, Doug, I'm not sure if we've got him set up yet. There we go, Doug. Mute is off. Mute's off. Doug. Okay. Welcome, Doug.
Rick, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Doug. It's so good to see you.
So my question is, Doug, my first question to you is,
thank you.
Doug, when you first met Rick at Indian River, right? And you were coaching him.
That was Susie in the background saying hi.
All right. Hi, Susie.
Hey,
When you first met Rick at Indian River, okay, you have to turn off all the other things. Make sure you just have one live feed.
Yeah.
You can mute that other one. Just mute it if you want to leave it up. Okay, you have to turn off all the other things. Okay. We'll get to Doug in a minute. Okay. I think you're with us now, Doug. Give us a good intro to Rick's story. Maybe. Can you hear me, Doug? Okay, he might have muted himself out. No?
well, Doug looks good.
Yeah, you look great, Doug. You been climbing Mount Everest or what? What's the latest? So, all right, well, Rick, we'll go this way. Rick, when you first met Doug, you walk on deck. Did you know who he was? How did you first meet him?
Can you guys hear me? I can't hear you.
Yes. We can hear you. We got you. I can hear you. Okay, we're gonna get.
He's gonna get back. He'll probably get back on. Well, I stepped on deck at Indian River, so I chose to go there sight unseen, and Doug is the epitome of what you would look for in a coach, regardless of your personality, temperament, sprinter, distance swimmer, whatever. Doug was the bomb when it came to coaching. Great motivator. More importantly, he was more concerned about the developmental aspects of an athlete. So he was tremendous. He was everything I'd ever asked for and more.
Well, I know for a fact that USA Swimming and all of FINA, the entire world, has benefited greatly from Doug's work, and Doug's one of the most fair and absolutely he's just at the cutting edge of his game, and he's always been there. Whether athletes always first, but he's been there for the coaches. and he's been somebody he helped us tremendously, because back in the day, here's what happened. We wanted to go into the Olympic Games with open water. People literally laughed at us. I was in the Olympic International Operations Committee, and I know the big time coaches that were in the back scoffing. Doug apologized to me after that OIOC meeting. This had to be late 80s when I stood up and said, we're going into the Olympics. And they're like, and Doug actually gave us a plan. Doug said, look, you need to talk to, you need to talk to Eaton, the guy from, and you need to talk to the rower who's she's still on the IOC.
Right.
The Los Angeles, right? So Anita, right? Anita de France.
Yep.
And it was Doug who helped us with all that. So when we talk about the story of trying to get into the Olympics, Rick, you were a big part of that. Doug Ingram was a big part of that. Dave Thomas, very big part of that. So
yes, absolutely.
What happened, and we had a chance. First there was an opportunity for us to do that, and it involved Dave and you and me and Dale having a meeting, and we were in Evian, France. We're going to talk a little bit about how we got to France, because Marian was a big part of that. And we kind of came up with this plan. Carol Zaleski, who was president of USA Swimming, came to me and said, if you really want to get in the Olympics, you need to get into politics. She's like, one of you, Rick or Sid. And I was taken over for Penny Dean as national team, and Rick was doing the coordinator and I was coach. And Rick said, well, I can do both coordinator and coach. It's kind of how I recall it, Rick. You were volunteering. You go over and be the politician. I'll stay here and be the coach. And I see Scott Prime saying Coach Ingram was the best he ever had.
Scott Prime, absolutely.
Yep. But I do think that particular moment in time was so critical, because it was from there where I launched into the FINA Technical Open Water Swimming Committee. In 1996, I was appointed. You took over as national team head coach. You'd been already the national team coordinator for years. And Dave Thomas was still very much involved, and he was getting ready to move. I think late 90s is around when he started with USA Swimming, isn't it?
Yeah.
Augustana. We had that big 25K in Augustana.
Yes.
With the electric motors. That was awesome. But without Doug, we never would have been in the Olympic Games. I mean, I know that for sure. And we'll get him back on so he can tell us a story about that. But what the competition where I recall all of the Australian Federation, the Italians, the Spanish, the French, where we all got together in 1994, in 1995. It was Evian, France.
I think that was 96.
That was 96.
Yeah.
I have the split sheets from the qualifying match. I'd like to first talk a story or two while we're waiting for Doug to get back. And I hope he can hear it. I know Joe's working with him. But the idea is we had this up and coming 25K event, and people thought we were crazy. The very first one that we went to FINA, Rick already alluded to, was in Perth. And we actually, the first time we ever traveled with the national team, I remember John Urbanchek taking us in. Denny Persley was a national team coordinator. And then it was a chance for us to travel to Perth and get all the uniforms. It was great. A couple of years go by. Here's our next chance. Now they're having a standalone event, and it's a race from France to Switzerland and back to France, right at Lausanne. I mean, FINA should do this race again. We've talked about this race. They held it over the French Bastille Day weekend. We fly over there. It was unbelievable. But to qualify, now it's been 3 years, and a lot of pool swimmers are acting like, oh, trip to France, I get to see Switzerland, I can beat all these guys. Here's the lineup of people trying to qualify, just some of them. In the 1994 National 25K in Wrightsville Beach, we had people like Karen Burton, Jeff Kostoff, Rory Callahan. We had Kristen Clodfelter, Kevin Joyce, Lisa Hazen, Carrie Liderson, Rick Heltzel, P.H. Mullen, the great author. P.H. was swimming. Samantha Shabatar, Marian was coaching, the great pit swimmer. Bambi Bowman, Lars Jorgensen, John McGowan, Jay Benner, Chad Hundeby, Chuck Wiley. Everybody wanted to go over to Evian. And when we got to Wrightsville Beach, Jay Wilkerson had been national champ. He had retired. And Dan Forrester in the Waves of Wilmington. I got Wrightsville Beach on my mind because I just saw today Bobby Guntero's leaving NC State, going to be head coach at UNC Wilmington. I called him up. So I got Wilmington on my mind today. Wrightsville Beach, I would say 60, 70% of the boat guys were like, yeah, we can do this, no problem. And we're out there with the Coast Guard at 5:30 a.m. and we're like, huge swells. Now they were pretty gentle, but they were big, but the weather was calling for increased turbulence, but we had no real backup day. We had to pick a team. So I'm out there as a national team coach and trying to get the race going. Rick, you had Chuck Wiley. So tell us what happened. And all the boats had to go, there was 3 miles between where the swimmers started on the beach. They were going to do loops. If you know Wrightsville Beach, between the two piers, is a big race every year. And that's going to get bigger. Bobby and I are going to pump it up. But we basically went the face of that island several times. So the swimmers started at the beach. You had to say goodbye to Chuck. What happened next?
All right, so I'm supposed to meet my boat on the shore, and the boats are behind the beach. So they're on the other side of this jetty. And all of a sudden we find out that the boats are not coming out because they can't make it. And so it was going to be a nice little, 10-footer fishing boat. Well, so the only boats that could make it out there were these big yachts. And so I find out that, mine is coming, but they had already started the race. And so I'm waiting for them on shore. And then I get word that, this boat is too big to come up on shore. And so the only way, that I could get out there was to swim out. Well, I had all of Chuck's stuff, so.
Now, when you say all of his stuff, this is a 25-kilometer race. It takes 5 to 7 hours, depending on weather and swimmer. What stuff did you have? How did you carry it?
Pretty much everything that was going to keep him alive, so fluid replacement, any kind of first aid, blankets, whatever, so I get it all into this bag, and he comes up onto this pier, and I throw it down. They catch it. Wait.
You're talking about a fishing pier at Sport. It was in Wrightsville Beach.
Yeah.
And it was
about 5-8 meters up.
And it's got to be 100 meters out into the sea, right? Past the breakers.
Yeah.
So you go running with this cooler out to the end of the pier, and your boat's not out there.
No.
Your boat's not going out. That guy said, I can't make it. It's too much. And he turned around and went home.
Right. So we get this big old 40-footer, right? And so I drop all this stuff down, and then they're like, well, I don't know how to get you because there's no ladders. So I was like, all right, scoot, move back just a little bit. And I jump. And I climb up the backside of, actually I did a flip off of it. And I climbed up on the back of the boat, got in, and off we go. But it was a while before we actually caught up to Chuck.
Well, I do have these splits, and as it turned out, with all these great pool swimmers in there, like Kostoff and certainly Jorgensen. I don't know if you can see those, but freeze it. You can blow it up later. And I'll send it out if anybody wants to contact me. Chuck Wiley ends up winning the race. His final time, 5 hours, 39:02. Now, that was every bit of 25K. Yes, 3 of the finest. Okay, if we're talking, Murph, you're 4. And Chad Hundeby got 2nd, Jay Benner 3rd. Chad had a complication, so he passed. And then Jay and Chuck became the 2 guys, both open water. So the open water guys ended up holding on. And, in the girls' race, I do remember Karen got sick. That was sad because she was certainly one of our best. But our young girls, Bambi Bowman ends up winning the race. And she was the first woman in 6:02. And then Marian, your girl, Samantha, was 6:07 to get the second. What do you remember about that day, Marian?
I'm pretty sure Samantha was still swimming. She was still in high school. So she was swimming with Charlie Fry.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah. So I'm pretty sure that that's what she was doing. But it was a perfect day for her. You give her all those waves and she was right at home. And she loved it, and I know she signed on for a minute, and she's heading out to swim right now down by the Wonder Bar. So she was going out for a swim, but she was. It was a perfect conditions, and she went right up and earned her spot.
All right. Well, Doug, I'm glad you're back. What we're talking about, we talked a little bit about getting into the Olympics and how we could not have done that without you, my friend. You were the one who gave us the into Anita de France and the Eaton character. And actually he was I remember when we met them out there in Colorado Springs, but I wanted to get back to where you first met Rick Walker. What did you see in him that first year that led you to believe this could be somebody special?
Well, I was very fortunate, Sid, people like yourself and Rick, et cetera, to be part of my career. And Rick had come down from Illinois. We were at Indian River Community College, and impressive athlete, as you, I think, mentioned earlier, and particularly dedicated, committed to training, was willing to do whatever you asked of him to get better. And the great story is at the national championships, the junior college national championships, we had huge rivalry with Daytona Beach Community College, and it was going to be a very close meet. They had, you probably remember this name, Don Gibbs. You remember Don?
Yes, Florida State, right?
Yeah, well, he was
at Florida, and he coached at Florida as well, right?
He did.
South Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Don Gibbs.
Initially, he was at Daytona Beach Community College.
Gotcha.
And a great sprinter. And then he won the 50 hands down, easy. Our guys were, way back in the wake. Meanwhile, first to start the meet off, and Sid, you guys know how this is. You need a great swim to get the meet started. And Rick laid down a new national junior college record in the prelims in the 500 freestyle. And of course we were on fire from that point on. But the big race was the next day because Don was swimming the 200. He was going to win the 50 and the 100, Gibbs was. And Rick was obviously hands-on favorite for the 500, 1650. But who wins the 200 may be the turning point in the meet. And Rick, if you recall, you were a little unhealthy that weekend.
I recall. I definitely recall.
I mean, literally Thursday night after the 500, we put him to bed, put him on medication, got him up the next morning, kind of waltzed through the prelims just to get into the final because he was struggling. And then that night for the final, and of course Gibbs goes out with his sprinter speed, and Rick is smart as well as talented and stays right on the lane line, drags off him for 175 meters, and then comes past. I don't know how much it was in maybe the hundredths of a second, maybe the tenths of a second, but it was damn close. And touches him out, and our team goes crazy. Rick, we have to have him on the 800 relay to win it. So back he goes with the trainer and gets fluids in him and all that, and has to be on the 800. We win that one thanks to Rick and others. And then it comes down to the last day of the meet, and now he's got to go a mile. He's got to go the 1650. So that told me everything I need to know about Rick Walker right there. The courage, the ability, the determination, the willingness to do whatever it took for the team. So when I had a chance to hire my first full-time assistant, actually at Southern Illinois, we'd always had grad assistants before that time, and I was able to convince them that, if we're going to be a program that's going to have a chance to do well, I need a full-time. Plus, we were taking on the women's team. So anyway, Rick was the only one and only choice for me at that point in time.
That's pretty awesome. And I do remember, Marian, you being at Pitt, you must have remembered SIU starting up the women's team.
Yeah.
And Rick, that was when you first got there. Is that right?
Say that again.
When you first got there, Doug, is that the first year they had men and women?
It was the first year we coached them both.
Oh,
Yeah.
Tim Hill, if you remember Tim Hill, Tim had been there.
Yes.
And Tim and I had the men, Tim had the women. I took over from Bob Steele, another great character in our sport.
and SIU, and he took over from Ray Essick, right?
Right.
He did, who took over from Willis Casey, if you go way back.
Talking real legends now, real legends.
Now we are those guys. And, there couldn't have been a more different type of program, my program versus Bob Steele's program. And so the poor athletes, it was like a whiplash for them. And then, of course, Rick came in and helped stabilize that. A different day and a different audience. I'll have to tell you a couple of Bob Steele stories.
Oh, yeah. No, we may get Bob on here before too long. And actually, Doug, just so you know, and I think you'll be better if you can just, back up just a little bit so we can see you. That's perfect right there. So, Doug, next week, we actually have on, you were talking about that 200 free drafting that Rick did. I think we're going to tell a story. If I'm not mistaken, we're going to have the great Laurie Lawrence on, who has a new book. And poor Matt Biondi, talk about drafting. Say he probably felt a lot like Don Kipp, when Duncan Armstrong came by. So Laurie's got a new book out. We'll talk about that later. But
that'd be good, and we can also talk about Bruce Hayes and
yes,
oh yeah,
off the Albatross.
Yes.
Was that a great 200? That was an incredible relay. I'd like to get those guys on. And I was thinking about that and thinking about all the history that you two have shared. But going back to getting open water into the Olympic Games, Marian, what's your recollection of how that transpired? What you remember about it, and how it affected you and some of the athletes you were coaching?
Right. So we were working hard at it, originally really pushing for that 25K, as that's what that was our golden event. And I think as you moved further up into the FINA and heard more about it, you kind of figured out that we weren't going to get people to watch for five years.
I think Doug knows that well. Yeah.
We had more than one conversation.
We had to really change course and get focused on the 10K. But you as usual, Stevie, you sold it to all of us with a great package that this is how we're going to do it. This is why we need to do it. This is how we can get in now, get a medal now, instead of trying to keep fighting for this 25K that people weren't going to watch. Make it like the length of a marathon for running, a 2-hour. This is reasonable. We can do this. And we all got behind you and just kept pushing.
Well, it wasn't. It was me here in the USA, but it wasn't just me. It was really Rick, and it was Dave Thomas. It was guys like Doug giving us quiet information. And then, Doug, you remember those days? It was like, look, guys, we love open water, but we're not going to get a 5 to 7 hour race. They were trying to cut back on events, and really, as I recall, Doug, and this is Mustafa Lafouy was the president of FINA at the time. And we were working very, very hard when we decided, and to be fair, I got to bring in Chris Gusden one of these days, because he and I and Dennis Miller kind of came up with this idea when we were at the Perth World Championships in the '98. And when we came up with, we got to add a 10K, Sam Freeze, God rest his soul too, he said, we can run a 10K at our World Championships in Hawaii. Well, of course he could. He was using all USA Swimming's money. Oh, we'll do another race. It doesn't matter. Sam, oh yeah, we'll get more medals. But in reality, that World Championship was the first 10K. We ran the 10K for the USA that Fran Crippen's sister Maddie swam in for us when we were trying to bring in Olympians in Atlantic City. Instead of just doing the 37K around the island, we said, we got to get a 10K race. And FINA and the IOC wanted to see these races were held around the world, world championships, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were really pretty focused, laser focused, to try and get that 10,000 meter race into the games. And Doug, I think we have to thank you and those who knew that.
It was a labor of love, and there were a lot of people involved. I was a small part of that. But I'll tell you one other thing. Stevie or Sid, what do we call you?
Whatever you like.
Just call him
Coach.
Bruce.
How about that? So Coach Cassidy, this is a kind of behind the scenes thing. You know, triathlon was trying to get in as well. And of course, there's a huge, or especially at that time, there was a huge debate between the Ironman people, you know, that goes forever.
Yeah.
As you know, versus the ones wanting the sprint, et cetera. So they actually, I gave them the recommendation, hey, look at what open water's doing. Great, bring it down, make it a distance around 2 hours, then you're going to have a shot. And they actually used your model to get themselves in.
And then jumped ahead of us.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, there are a lot of people, and I credit Penny Dean. Like she was straight up.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
Penny said, look, I'm going to turn this over to you and Rick. You guys take over, and I'm not interested in a 10K in the Olympics. I've done my part, I think 25K. And she was an old school, you know, she unbelievable English Channel record setter, you know, and it held until Chad Hundaby broke it 20 years later. But Rick, what's your recollection of those early, you know, championships and working with Penny and getting it on to that stage where we did add the 10K in?
Well, Penny, again, is one of those individuals that without her, you know, none of us would be this today. You know, she had a great vision, and she was definitely, you know, a purist, which I think made all of us purists. And, you know, that's, I think we all fell into that purist form, and we needed to rethink things. I remember sitting in the office with Doug, and it's like, Doug, why can't we have a 25K? Rick, it's just not. It's just not. You don't want to go there. Nobody wants. Doug, 25K. It's the marathon. Swimming was the first event ever. Why can't we're not going into the Olympics for the first time? We're coming back to the Olympics. You know, and Doug was really, really good at just kind of bringing things down, bringing them all into perspective. And it's like, Rick, you know, this is the way we've got to go. If you're going to get it in. And then, of course, we started thinking about, okay, the 10K. Of course, we had the developmental events, the 5 and the 15,
right?
The 25K. So all we really had to do was introduce the middle ground between the 5 and the 15. Drop the 15, it becomes the 10. 2-hour event, and you can do it inside a rowing course. So now we're thinking the way the people who are making decisions are thinking.
Yeah.
So I can put another event in a venue that I've already spent money on. Or if I'm hosting an Olympic Games and I want to throw it out in the most pristine beaches in the world, and I want to show that off, I can have it in a beach. So there's options, but it's 2 hours.
And so
of course, you know what happened next.
yes, we went that way. We pushed it. We got in. I remember finding out I was actually in line in the Space Mountain in Orlando. I was right there where Joe is. I was with my 5 or 6 year old, 8-year-old son. I don't know. Quinn it was 2005. So I guess he was 10, 8, 9, or 10. Yeah. And we were up there, finally got to the front of the line. And I did a call from Greg Egger. It passed. I was like, woohoo, it was the best roller coaster ride I ever had. We got in the front car and we had a blast. And I'll never forget, but all the people worked on it for many years. And we're trying to save those longer races. You know, the 25K, it still often determines the team world champion at every FINA World Championships. And Marian, you swam in the professional ranks, which a lot of our 25K swimmers did at the time. Karen Burton were two of the big ones. Karen, of course, world ranked many years in a row. But give me a story, Marian, about you and Karen doing. You had races longer than 25K, right? What races?
Yeah, I think there's like the 57.5K, and there's the 88K. But the 88K, I think, was shorter because it was like all with the current. But on the 57.5K, you had to like do this loop where you came back around the back.
Where was that?
That was in Argentina in the Parana River. And it was crazy. But Karen and I went, I think it was one of the first years we did the world, like the FINA World rankings, and that was like the final race. So you had to go to that one so you could collect your money and see what place you were for the whole year. And Karen and I went, and we had to like we didn't travel with anyone. So we had to find some people to sit in our boat who hopefully spoke some English. And we were swimming along, and like, you really don't know what you're going to get. And I remember, I think it was Karen, we were swimming along, we were pretty close, and all of a sudden her boat sank. You're just swimming along, and you just have crazy things like that happen. And they didn't have people telling you where to go, and you just have to figure it out as you go. All of a sudden you're swimming along, and there's a cow right there drinking water at the river. You know, and I think it was her boat or my boat, but at some point we shared a boat. It might have been my boat sank and I shared her boat. But it was crazy. We had some crazy times.
As I understand it, the history of that, Doug, you'll appreciate this, Rick, that started maybe 100 years ago. They had flotillas that would go and they'd have the statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and they would float her down the river, and then it would be like a celebration. They'd stop, and people would start to float with it, and eventually it became a race by the 1940s or so. and
it was crazy. There were people everywhere.
Everywhere. People still watch it.
Yeah,
and the guys who run that, you know, Marcello Macchio, fantastic. He's still trying. And what we want to do with FINA and the whole world of history is keep those long races together. Anybody who believes in them, who really wants to be a part of it, really needs to, get on board and help us with that. Contact me. But Doug, as we're looking forward to the Olympics and we think about what's next, kind of the TOES plan, which is Technical Open Water Swimming Committee for FINA, and Rick and I have talked about it, is to get in this 5K relay, mixed event, 2 men, 2 women. You don't have to bring any more athletes to the event. You can use pool swimmers, and we're really pushing that to kind of be the second event. What do you think about that one, Doug?
No, I think that's a wise decision. Make sure you keep the gender equity in there. Make sure you don't add any more bodies, because that's a huge red flag with the organizers and the IOC. So I think, and as you know, even athletics now has a mixed event, which they said for sure we're never going to do this, but they realize that if they want more events, they're going to have to do more creative type of thinking. And so, yeah, that's the way to go. No more bodies, keep the gender equity, keep it short, and be able to draft some pool swimmers in.
And I think, to be fair to our audience, Doug, because I brought you in as a surprise guest, everyone knows Rick and Marian have been coaching. We were talking about them. I didn't even tell, if people don't know who you are, your position within the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee is senior director. Man, that's pretty good. So you know what you're talking about. Like, you have to deal with these Olympic people all the time, every day. That's your job.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it.
Okay. So while we have you, where do you see, with all of this challenge with the COVID and everybody, talking about, I know I'm talking to my people in Tokyo, and I know that the enthusiasm, some people say, is dwindling with the Japanese. I mean, where do you see it going? How do we bank out of this one and make Paris even bigger? What's the plan for the Olympic Committee?
Well, the unknowns are just so hard to deal with right now. The organizers and the IOC want to keep up a positive front, so they keep saying, absolutely, we're going to make it happen, etc. They know they're going to have to scale it back to some degree, and by that, we hope that what they're thinking by scaling back is a lot of the frills and extras that have no impact at all on the athletes. I'll say this and probably get in trouble like you did. You said you got in trouble, Sid, before. But we don't need the IOC members there. We don't need people staying in 5-star hotels. We don't need a huge transport network to support them with private limos. What we need is to run the events with the athletes and hopefully be able to have partial attendance in the stands. So that's the key as far as trying to make it happen for next year. And it's still, I hate to be a bit of a doomsayer, it's still up in the air. It still may or may not happen.
I'm with you, and Rick, I don't know what you hear. I do hear more and more of that the last several weeks, sadly. And I'm hopeful, but I know that we are also very much trying to seize this opportunity with our committee and talk them into moving the event, because they found out recently that the Tide, we're in a tidal area, and it's a beautiful venue, and the Japanese people have done an unbelievable job to date. They've worked very, very hard, and I feel bad for them that this is, because I know we'd all be there right now. It would have been fantastic. But the idea that the tides are going to make the water a little more shallow, and it may not be the best place. So we're trying to use that as a, hey, let's go to a cooler site, because we're so concerned about the heat and so concerned about the quality of the water. I do believe these screens are doing will help it. But I think, Doug, you give some great advice. And Rick, what's the latest you're hearing from your end, Ioana business?
Obviously, whatever is happening with FINA, you could just mirror that with Ioana. But we're still under under plans right now, and continuing on with Pan American Juniors, as well as Pan American Games. That's going to be 2021, and the Senior Games at 2023. But travel, we're doing all virtual meetings, and competitions are on hold, until things start to open up. But for right now, everything's on hold, just like it is for FINA, for every federation around the world. It's not like FINA's getting left behind, and it's certainly not like Ioana's not following suit. It's just we're all in limbo.
Right. Well, Marian, you're there coaching age group swimmers. We're waiting on USA Swimming to tell us about Olympic trials. Certainly, we know who's already qualified. We've also heard stories about people that aren't qualified. I know you've got some young athletes. I know you've got one very strong young athlete, McClellan, your own son.
Yes.
He's probably trying to make the Olympic trials, although he might be 4 or 8 years away.
He's a few years away.
How old's your son now?
He just turned 13.
Teenager in the house.
Huh?
And so, yeah, 4 more years, 3 more years, right?
Yeah, he's got some time. We'll see. He was out at an open water swim practice this afternoon, and we have an open water race coming up, sponsored by our USA Triathlon local group. On Saturday, and I've got a lot of my team's gonna swim it. They just have to pay for the USA Triathlon membership, 1-day membership, whatever, and they get out there and they're doing a 2-mile race.
So can anybody join in Pittsburgh area if they show up? Who do they contact? How do they get in?
It's called Get Fit Families is the website. You go to Get Fit Families and you can sign up there. And they ran one in June that 4 of my kids did, and now a ton of them are going to go do it.
2 miles?
You can do a 2-mile. They have a 2-mile, a 1 mile, a half mile, and a 1/4 mile.
Yeah.
It's at the same site where I used to run the Allegheny Mountain one.
The Beaver Creek?
Yeah. It's not at the creek. You came to the creek. We're now out at Moraine State Park in the north. And It's beautiful. It's just Porter's Cove. It's literally a mile to the bridge and back.
Oh, I love hearing about races going on. Rick, is there anything going on in your area?
Yeah, we've got, tons of people. Doug, you know this area, Little Grassy.
Oh, yeah.
Little Grassy Lake. That was the first pool to open up. You pretty much could go out at any given time. Little old Carbondale, right? And you're going to you see the little neon colored pods.
Yeah.
And they're all attached to swimmers with a kayaker next to them. But our club is out there. They've been out there for weeks. I just had a young lady come up from Texas to do some training with me. She was here for a long weekend. But the pool, the college pool just opened up, but they're not allowing 16 and under. And it's like, okay, well, that's our age group kids.
Yeah.
But August 4th, I believe it's August 4th. I think they're going to start letting younger ones in. It's too much of a liability, to have an outside group, young kids, and not, to assume the responsibility for them, because the parents can't come in.
Right.
Right. So, I don't blame them. It's just it's just another challenge, but we've got lakes, and, we've been out there swimming for a long time now.
Well, that's one of the things that, I look at silver linings, and I know the 3 of you have all been very positive-minded, influential coaches throughout your career and still are, and you're always looking for that silver lining. And if you want to buy a good book, Elizabeth's book, Beisel, Silver Linings, we had her on a few weeks back, and it is a great book. I would tell you anybody would enjoy it. You don't have to be a swimmer to enjoy that book. But the reality is we are where we are. And we're dealing with what we're dealing with. And, I saw Ann Ballou O'Brien. Are you swimming in the season? Marian, I know I'd have a place to stay. I haven't.
Yes.
Jimmy Tierney, Saluki Nation.
Jimmy Tierney.
One of the greatest coaches. He got robbed out of his first Division II title there with McHenry this year. Come on.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding.
But let's talk
Jimmy, hey,
keep looking silver lining, Jimmy. You got the team of the year.
Jimmy Tierney's one of the finest men coaching these days.
Well, we love Tierney because it's another brother-sister team, because Dorsey and Jimmy and Marian and I go for the sibling picture whenever we get to nationals.
And Coach Sid.
Love those Irish Catholic kids,
Coach Sid or Coach Stevie. How lucky was I? I had Coach Walker and Coach Tierney on the same staff.
Yes.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Those were some glory days.
They made
Yep.
me look really good.
They can do that. Well, I tell you, an hour really flies by fast, and we kind of have a tradition as we're signing off. I ask each of you to just take a few moments and share a little bit, of anything that you like that'll kind of be uplifting and positive and get coaches still focused, looking down the road. We're not going to let this thing knock us back too far. We're going to step up. And so, Doug, as the senior, would you please give us some advice?
Well, I will, and you guys already know this, but I will reiterate that when things are a challenge, when you need creativity, when you need innovation, nobody does it better than American athletes and American coaches, and in particular in swimming, but in all of our sports. So, the whole world's dealing with this, and everybody's trying to figure out how to make it happen. And we will figure it out better than anybody else. And so Tokyo, Paris, beyond will be fantastic Olympic Games for us.
All right, thanks. And before we go to Marian, I just got to acknowledge that shout out. Diane Limerick.
Diane.
Oh my God, one of the greatest.
Diane.
That's great.
Diane Limerick.
And I think Diane retired this year. I saw that she had, been. I remember reading something about it. I love you, Diane. We never would have gotten through without you.
Oh,
That's for sure.
Hey, Sid, Dave Thomas and I rearranged her hotel room one time. We put everything in her room upside down.
Yeah, I can still get it back. I can see Dave doing that. All right, Marian, you got a sign-off statement for us?
Yes. So I think it was the great coach John Wooden said, things turn out best for those who make the best of how things turn out. And I certainly feel like that is what we're trying to do, and we will continue to try and do to keep things going positive and getting the most out of this crazy time in history.
Coach Wooden, a classic. Doug,
Yeah.
I got to swim one year at UCLA. Coach Wooden and Coach Haynes had cubicles. They didn't have offices. They had cubicles. Guys that level, Wooden, basketball, had a cubicle. And now his office was at home. He said, no, I just want a cubicle. Talk about humble. Call me teacher. Thank you, Marian. That is a great quote. All right, Rick, bring us home.
All right. Well, obviously, in every challenge or something that you view as overwhelming, there are many things that I think that have been positive about what's been going on. Number one, I think families are reconnecting. I think families for all too long, they get consumed with everything that's going on. We got social media, we've got phones, we've got computers, all that stuff. And I think we're coming back and reconnecting as family units. And I think that's been a really good thing. So I think we're going to have a generation of young kids that are going to grow up really well and adjusted. Secondly, I think coaches, I think we need to remember, we actually coach for our kids to go through exactly what we're going through. We've got to trust that what we are doing and preparing them for is exactly what we're going through. And we've got to trust in them that they're capable of being able to do that. And third, I think we need to remember everybody's going through this. It's not like I'm behind or the U.S. is getting behind. Everybody is at the same place. Somebody might get a head start. That's fine. That's the challenge. You go chase them. But, everybody's in the same boat. And we're going to come out of this just fine.
Well, I love the enthusiasm and the optimism there, Rick, and all of you. And you give everybody some reason to hope. You see why you three are outstanding coaches. And for me, I've been reading this book on Celtic wisdom. John O'Donohue, if you want, it's a fantastic book. Bob Matson, and in the chapter I'm on right now, he talks about the fearful eye will see fear. And he talks about the loving eye and how that is going to be what gets you through your life, and how you see things, the optimism, the positive, the persistence, the belief. So for me, and you guys have heard me say this before, I liken this time to an open water swim that we're not quite sure, the waves are up a little bit like Wrightsville Beach, who knows, but we're going to get through it. Just like you all say, we are going to get through it. And I do thank you all again. Tim Murphy, wish you could have been with us. I understand why you're not, but I do really believe that we have this group of open water thinking, this kind of positive. If you're crazy enough to get in and do a 25K or a 57K, even a 10K, and you're going to be able to get through this. Stay focused, stay positive, and be sure we're going to have some more great stories. Thank you all.
Thanks, Stevie.
Thank you. Great to see you guys.
Thank you. Great
Good
seeing
night,
you guys.
Join us on the Swim Monkey.
Swim
Swim Monkey.
TV.
On the Monkey.